sleep, you weary hobo. Let the towns drift slowly by. Can you hear those steel rails humming? That's a hobo's lullaby. Welcome to Folk and Trad, a program of the folk music and folk events here in Thurston County. My name is Bert Meyer, your host for Folk and Trad. And for the program today, we're going to delve back into the archives, all the way back to the 70s, when I taught a class out at Tumwater High School called American History Through Folk Music, where the students got to learn about their history through the folk songs and even got to play some instruments. One of the nice parts about teaching that class is I could bring in some wonderful guest lecturers, or guest singers in this case. We've got one of those for you today, and his name is Larry Hanks. He's quite a well-known singer throughout the United States and lives now in California, I understand. And he's quite an authority on train songs and cowboy songs, among many other things he does. And that's what we're going to bring for you today, are some train songs and some cowboy songs. So here's Larry Hanks.
Got a treat today, as I mentioned the other day, that we got Larry Hanks with us. And Larry, I told you something about him. We've heard some of his songs on the National Geographic record, and then some of the others that we today he's going to go through some more material on railroads. We heard some of his cowboy songs, so we may slip back into a cowboy song or two, I don't know.
This is a song from a recording group called the Carter Family, who were recording in the 1920s and 30s. And they made an enormous dent on the world of country music. It kind of established the precedent for a whole wide style that's today known as country music, but most everybody acknowledges that the Carter family had a whole lot to do with the way that sounds. And this is a song that one of them made up called Railroading on the Great Divide. The Great Divide is an area of the country. It's a line that goes down through the continent that divides the watersheds, so that west of that line all the water runs into the Pacific Ocean, and east of that line all the water runs into the Atlantic Ocean. And up in it's basically the Rocky Mountains. My grandfather lived in a town in Wyoming that was in the Great Divide Basin, where the line of the Great Divide comes down and then it splits and makes a kind of a circle, where the water in that section doesn't go anywhere, it just sinks back into the ground, apparently. I don't know exactly, but it's a high, wide, flat part of the country. It's really beautiful. And this is called Railroading on the Great Divide. 1916, I started to roam out in the west, no money, no home. I was drifting along with the tide, and I landed on the Great Divide. Railroading on the Great Divide, nothing around me but the Rockies and sky. There you'll find me as years roll by, railroading on the Great Divide. Ask any old-timer from old Cheyenne, railroad in Wyoming's the best in the land. Long steel rails and short cross ties I laid along the Great Divide. Railroading on the Great Divide, nothing around me but the Rockies and sky. There as years roll by, railroading on the Great Divide. As I looked out across the breeze, number 9's coming the fastest on wheels. Across the valley she thunders with pride and rolls across the Great Divide. Railroading on the Great Divide, nothing around me but the Rockies and sky. There you'll find me as years roll by, railroading on the Great Divide. I suppose one of the most famous railroad songs is The Wreck of the Old 97, which was a train that ran along the East Coast. Well, not the coast exactly, but in the eastern part of the country. It ran from Washington, D.C. down to New Orleans, and was basically on the Southern Railroad line. Most of the versions that I ever heard were real kind of short and brief, but I found a couple that were really long, and so I kind of jammed them together into one version. I'm going to take a second in the middle to turn the page, but I'll sing you this one because it really tells a whole lot more of the story than you've heard before if you've heard the original song. The original song. That's a sort of a misnomer. No, that's the interesting thing about folk music is that nobody ever quite knows what is the original song unless you learn it from the guy who wrote it, or at least you have a page that says written by so-and-so. You can figure it's pretty close to the way he wrote it, he or she wrote it. But in a case like this, there might have been a half a dozen different sets of words made up about the incident when it happened. And it's pretty much agreed that this train really did have this wreck. In fact, the Seattle Folklore Journal has a whole issue. It's actually somebody else's thesis that they just published in their journal that describes the wreck and what happened and who was driving the train and who was the station master at such and such a station and all that stuff. But once one of the songs got recorded, then somebody else would make up a new verse because he thought he knew something that the recorded song didn't have in it or something like that. So this is a combination of two different versions, one from Pink Anderson, who's a street singer in Carolinas, and the other is Pop Stoneman, who was an auto harp player in the mountains. And anyway, this is how it goes. On the 29th day of one October morning, the clouds were hanging low. 97 pulled out from Washington City like an arrow shot from a bow. Old 97 was the fastest mail train the South had ever seen. He ran from New York down through Washington City, Danville down to New Orleans. I was standing on the mountain one cold frosty morning, watching the smoke from below. That was coming from the form of a black and dusty engine way down on the Southern Railroad. It was 97, the fastest mail train that run on the Southern line. And when she pulled into Lynchburg, Virginia, she was 47 minutes behind. Steve Brady was an engineer, a very brave man was he. There are many brave men who lost their lives for the railroad company. They gave him his orders at Monroe, Virginia. Steve, you're way behind time. This is not 38, but it's old 97. You must put her in dispenser on time. Just one more trip, said the sleepy conductor as he kissed his loving wife. I've stolen enough money from the railroad company to last us all through life. Goodbye, sweet wife, said the drunken brakeman as he waved his cap with delight. If the wheels will roll and the engineer stay sober, we'll all reach home tonight. Steve smiled when he said to his black and dusty fireman, throw me in a little more coal. As soon as we cross this White Oak Mountain, you watch old 97 roll. It's a mighty rough road from Lynchburg to Danville, lying on a 3-mile grade. It was on that hill that he lost his air brakes. You see what a jump he made. They were going down the hill, making 90 miles an hour, when the whistle began to scream. He was found in the wreck with his hand on the throttle and scalded to death by the steam. Oh, a sad farewell when we heard the signal and the brakeman dropped the pin. And for hours and hours the switchman waited for the train that will never pull in. Steve had a wife and also 3 children who were lying at home in bed. They received a sad message saying husband and father was now lying in North Danville dead. Now, ladies, you all let this be a warning from this time now and learn. Never speak harsh words to your true love and husband. He may leave you and never return. Well, did she ever return? No, she never returned, though the train was due at 1. And for hours and hours the watchman stood waiting for the train that never returned. A whole lot of songs. There's lots and lots of songs about train wrecks. It seems this is another one about a train wreck. In the high Sierra Mountains came an SP passenger train. The hobos tried to ride her, but alas, 'twas all in vain. The conductor took the tickets and counted every soul, and the engineer looked straight ahead and the fireman shoveled coal. Well, the fireman was a cowboy, but do not think it strange. He could make more money shoveling coal than riding on the range. But though he was a fireman, and though he had to sweat, he still remained a Western boy, and he kept his lariat. Well, the train was way behind time, and the passengers all were wild, when on the track a sudden there strolled a little child. Her golden hair in ringlets was hanging down her back. She little knew her danger grave as she strolled along that track. My God, the hoghead shouted, and he slammed on all the brakes. Oh, I'll never stop this train in time, 'cause I ain't got what it takes. Heaven help that wee tot, he cried in accents wild. And nothing stopped this SP train and saved that little child. Up stepped the cowboy fireman, and a gallant lad was he. He said, I will save that baby if I wreck this whole SP. He walked out on the running board with tears, his eyes were wet. And in his hand our hero brave bore his trusty lariat. Well, he quickly dropped a fast loop round a pole beside the track, and then he tied the other end around that big smokestack. He jerked the train right off the rails, and he caused a horrible wreck. And our hero lay there in the ditch with the engine on his neck. Oh, we will long remember that 45th of May. There were many gallant hearts all filled with fear that day. They buried that poor fireman where the prairie winds blow wild. He killed 200 passengers, but thank God he saved a child. That's what you call real American ingenuity. A lot of the history of railroads in terms of songs, a lot of the songs about railroads are hobo songs, because the freight trains were a good way to ride free, somewhat dangerous, but a lot of people like a little excitement in their life, I guess. And people are still riding the railroads, the freight trains. But in the 1930s, when the Depression came along, there was an awful lot of people, I mean thousands, who were just roaming around the country. And that period of time that created a whole family of people who are still riding the rails, or at least they're kind of hobos and I'm going down this track, I got tears in my eyes, trying to read a letter from my home. If this train runs me right, I'll be home tomorrow night, 'cause I'm 900 miles from my home. And I hate to hear the lonesome whistle blow. I'll pawn you my watch and I'll pawn you my chain, pawn you my gold diamond ring. If this train runs me right, I'll be home tomorrow night, 'cause I'm 900 miles from my home. And I hate to hear the lonesome whistle blow. The train I ride on is 100 coaches long. You can hear the whistle blow 100 miles. If this train runs me right, I'll be home tomorrow night, 'cause I'm 900 miles from my home. And I hate to hear the lonesome whistle blow. If my woman says so, I will railroad no more. Pack up my trunk and go home. This one's called the Kettle Valley Line. It's another sort of a hobo song about hobos riding the trains. I always ride upon the roof on the Kettle Valley Line. I always ride upon the roof on the Kettle Valley Line. I always ride upon the roof. I could pay the fare, but what's the use? So I always ride upon the roof on the Kettle Valley Line. I buy a sandwich from the cook on the Kettle Valley Line. I buy a sandwich from the cook on the Kettle Valley Line. I buy a sandwich from the cook. He pockets the money, the dirty crook, so I buy my sandwich from the cook on the Kettle Valley Line. I order my meals through the ventilator on the Kettle Valley Line. I order my meals through the ventilator on the Kettle Valley Line. I order my meals through the ventilator. Taste no worse, saves tipping the waiter, so I order my meals through the ventilator on the Kettle Valley Line. I always ride upon the roof on the Kettle Valley Line. I always ride upon the roof on the Kettle Valley Line. I always ride upon the roof. I could ride inside, but what's the use? So I always ride upon the roof on the Kettle Valley Line. This verse says the railroad bulls are gentlemen. The railroad bulls were private strong-arm policemen, private cops to keep the hobos off the trains. There got to be a time when the hobos there were so many that they tried to keep them off the trains and tried to keep them from riding. And certain towns have railroad yards that are known to be easy, a piece of cake to get on, you know, a nice place to get on the trains. And other places are known to be really bad, and they'll beat you over the head and dump you in the creek if they catch you. The railroad bulls are gentlemen on the Kettle Valley Line. The railroad bulls are gentlemen on the Kettle Valley Line. The railroad bulls are gentlemen, we'll never see their likes again. Oh, the railroad bulls are gentlemen on the Kettle Valley Line. They tip their hats and they call you sir on the Kettle Valley Line. They tip their hats and they call you sir on the Kettle Valley Line. They tip their hats and they call you sir, then they toss you in the local stir. They tip their hats and they call you sir on the Kettle Valley Line. Oh, I always ride upon the roof on the Kettle Valley Line. Yes, I always ride upon the roof on the Kettle Valley Line. I always ride upon the roof. I could ride inside, but what's the use? So I always ride upon the roof on the Kettle Valley Line. I always ride upon the roof on the Kettle Valley Line. This song was, I don't know how old it is originally. It was recorded by Roy Acuff in the 40s, who was a kind of a country music, I don't know, sort of a country music soul singer, would you say? He started a sort of a big band sound of country music, or not, maybe not started it, but he's one of the people I think of. Pardon?
Populated it?
Yeah, he kind of brought it up to date musically, and a lot of the songs he sang were his own, or at least he stole them. Like the Wabash Cannonball is one that he claims to have written, and he still claims that he wrote it. And yet, I know people who say they have proof that song existed before the 1900s. Here's Roy Acuff recording it in the late 30s or 40s and saying that he wrote it. Anyway, he sang the song called "The Freight Train Blues" and put a big yodel in it. And then Bob Dylan recorded it on his first record, even faster and more high-powered, with an even more screeching yodel in it. But and I never did like it that way. But then I heard a banjo player doing it, who has a lower voice than me and sings slower, and it really appealed to me. shack, just a little shanty by the railroad track. Oh, the humming of the drivers was my lullaby. The freight train whistle taught me how to cry. Freight train blues, I got 'em in the middle of my rambling shoes. Freight train blues, I got 'em in the middle of my rambling shoes. My daddy was a fireman and my mama dear, she was the only daughter of an engineer. My sweetie is a brakeman and it ain't no joke. Well, it's a shame the way she keeps a good man broke. Freight train blues, I got 'em in the middle of my rambling shoes. Freight train blues, I got 'em in the middle of my rambling shoes. Well, you know I'm old enough to quit this running around. Yes, I've tried 100 times to settle down, but every time I find a place I'd like to stay, a freight train whistle sends me on my way. Freight train blues, I got 'em in the middle of my rambling shoes. Freight train blues, I got 'em in the middle of my rambling shoes. A friend of mine, he's a folk singer and actually a professional entertainer named Utah Phillips. And he's really into trains and the lore about them. He wrote a song about the last run of the Wabash Cannonball. Wabash Cannonball ran from Chicago straight south, New Orleans, I guess, Memphis, I don't know. And apparently sometime in the 50s, it was a real famous train, just I guess because of the makeup of the cars, that fancy fittings inside, I don't know. And also the speed and stuff. It was a high power fast train. But they decided to stop it. They sold the railroad, sold to another company or something. And so they were having the last run of the Wabash Cannonball. And he was in Chicago and wanting to get somewhere south, so he found out he could take that last run, and he got on the train and took it. And it was full of all these country singers with their agents getting their pictures taken for their next album and stuff like that. People really going bananas about the last run of the Wabash Cannonball. And it turns out since then that they've had the last run of the Wabash Cannonball. Every now and then when they need to make a little extra money, they have another last run of the Wabash Cannonball. I stood on the Atlantic Ocean on the wide Pacific shore. There's a queen of flowing mountains to the South Hill by the door. She's long and tall and handsome, she's known quite well by all. She's a regular combination known as the Wabash Cannonball. A hobo's accommodation known as the Wabash Cannonball. Listen to the jingle, the rumble and the roar as she glides along the woodlands, through the hills and by the shore. Hear the mighty rush of the engine, hear the lonesome hobo's call, traveling through the jungles on the Wabash Cannonball. I see some of you people singing slightly different words than me. Like a lot of songs, everybody's got their own little twists and turns to it, depending on where you learned it. Well, the eastern states are dandy, so the western people say. From New York to St. Louis and Chicago, by the way. From the hills of Minnesota where the rippling waters fall, no changes can be taken on the Wabash Cannonball. Listen to rumble and the roar as she glides along the woodlands, through the hills and by the shore. Hear the mighty rush of the engine, hear the lonesome hobo's call, traveling through the jungles on the Wabash Cannonball. Jungles refers to hobo camps, which were called hobo jungles along the sides of the railroads. Well, here's to Daddy Claxton, may his name forever stand, and will he be remembered in the courts throughout the land. His earthly race is over and the curtain round him falls. We'll carry him home to victory on the Wabash Cannonball. Oh, listen to the jingle, the rumble and the roar as you glide along the woodlands, through the hills and by the shore. Hear the mighty rush of the engine, hear the lonesome hobo's call, traveling through the jungles on the Wabash Cannonball. Headed for Tolono on the Wabash Cannonball, Norfolk and Western all the way. St. Louis down the line, Detroit somewhere behind. Thought I heard that old conductor say, no round-trip ticket, you're on the final run. This cannonball ain't never coming back. Tomorrow she'll just be another memory and an echo down a rusty railroad track. I got off at Tolono, just below Champaign, was a flag stop on the edge of yesterday. The whistle blew a song, I whispered so long, tipped my hat and slowly walked away. No round-trip ticket, you're on the final run. This cannonball ain't never coming back. Tomorrow she'll just be another memory and an echo down a rusty railroad track. Well, I think about tomorrow, I wonder why it is we give up all the things we love the most. Goodbye, you old hog, I'll have to ride the dog till they build a subway coast to coast. No round-trip ticket, you're on the final run. This cannonball is never coming back. Tomorrow she'll just be another memory and an echo down a rusty railroad track. Thank you. We'll do one more train song, and then I'll do a couple cowboy songs. It's my wife, Laura.
Jim Blake, your wife is dying. to the depot by a lad all trembling with fright. He entered the office crying. His face was terribly white. Send this message to Dad in his engine. Mother is dying tonight. In something less than an hour, Jim's answer back to me flew. Tell wife I'll be there at midnight. I'm praying for her too. I left my son in the office, took the message to Jim's wife, and found the dying woman was scarce of breath and life. O'er hill and dale and valley thunders the heavy train. Her engine is sobbing and throbbing, and under a terrible strain. But Jim hangs on to the throttle, driving her crazy flight. And a voice cries out in the darkness, Godspeed the express tonight. I telephoned the doctor. How is Jim's wife, I asked. About the hour of midnight is as long as she can last. In something less than an hour, Jim's train will be along. But here I have a message. Oh God, there is something wrong. The message reads disaster. The train is in the ditch. The engineer is dying, derailed by an open switch. And there is another message to Jim's wife. It is addressed. I'll meet her at midnight in heaven. Don't wait for the fast express.
All right, this is a song that was written by a friend of mine in Berkeley, where I used to live, and I have a feeling she wrote it because she got real tired of hearing me sing cowboy songs. I used to sing lots and lots of cowboy songs. Every time I get up to sing, I'd sing about 4 or 5, amidst a lot of other kinds of songs. And so she wrote this song. It's called the Cowpuncher Song. And she used an old tune from an old Western ballad of some kind. There is something I don't. There is a particular reference that I don't like about it, about Indians. And sometimes I don't like to sing this song because it seems derogatory, and I don't want that to come across at all. That's not the way I feel. But other than that, it's a very funny song. So. I am an old cow puncher, I punch them cows so hard. I have me a cow punching bag set up in my backyard. This bag is made of leather and so are cows, of course. When I get tired of punching cows, I go and punch a horse. One day as I was punching upon my leathern cow, an Indian walks up to me and first he asks me how. I says it is quite easy and showed him with a slug. The very next word that Indian said to me that day was, ugh. I went back to my punching as all good cowboys do, when a well-known band of rustlers came rustling into view. I said, hello, how are you, and what might bring you here? I said, if it's all right, we'd like to rustle up some steer. Oh, no, kind sir, that will not do. My boss would fire me, for I'm the best cow puncher out on this whole prairie. But if you'd care to set a spell, I'll rustle up some lunch, and maybe in the afternoon you'll get to watch me punch. Oh, it's lonesome in the saddle ever since my old horse died. And sometimes when it's late at night, I dream she's by my side. We're punching cows together, forever do we roam. I am an old cow puncher and a long, long way from home. This has become one of my favorite cowboy songs in the last year or so. It seems like one of those songs, and I know several, that were originally a poem and then later set to music, which is a little more scholarly than somebody just making up a song about something on the spot. And a lot of songs are parodies of other songs, or somebody will take a tune that they already know of one song and then write a new set of words to it. But this is called 40 a month and found, meaning $40 a month salary for a cowboy, and found means food and room and board, if you can call sleeping on the ground and eating beans room and board. But anyway, it's a kind of a nice portrait of a cowboy's life and the different moods that his life takes on. When the sun pops over the mesa's top and bakes the plains below, and it's so damn hot that the cattle drop and sweat and pant and blow, and the cowhand rides the holes and creeks over the burning ground, with the sweat a-pouring down his cheeks for 40 a month and found. When the snow blows down from the mesa's rim, and the barbed wire hums in the gale, and the cattle drift into every dip, and the storm wipes out the trail, and the cowhand rides the draws and fence over each drifted mound. Freezing the fool ain't got no sense for 40 a month and found. When the guns flash out in the midnight raid and the wild herd makes a run, and the cattle bawl in their mad parade and the whole world comes undone, and the cowhand rides with his knees clamped tight, crazy and hellward bound. Fighting the fool sure loves a fight for 40 a month and found. Well, I wonder when all of the work is through and the last herd's bedded down, what a poor cowhand will find to do while he waits for his harp and his crown. Will he herd the moon and the stars at night, keeping them heaven bound, and gathered so they'll keep shining bright for 40 a month and found. Thank you.
Go to sleep, you weary hobo. Let the towns drift slowly by. Can you hear those steel rails humming? That's a hobo's lullaby.